I was the biggest Bruce Lee fan growing up. So I've even got one of my posters back here is Bruce Lee. I got nunchucks. I've got a Bruce Lee out, like the yellow outfit he wore in the Game of Death. Like I remember my dad taking me to see Enter the Dragon, like the documentary kind of movie they did, and just being blown away and like
Yeah.
obsessed with Bruce Lee as a kid. So I had heard from a lot of people that this 30 for 30 Be Water was really good. So I'd seen a lot of the 30 for 30s before, generally blown away by them. Like the Reggie Miller
Hmm.
one I loved, the
Yeah.
one on the U I love. There's so many good ones
Oh
you can't
yeah.
even get
So
into.
many.
So I would, okay,
That bad, huh? That bad.
it's just different than what I expected. And I think I was so jarred is why I didn't enjoy it. It's called Be Water, and it's that stems from a very philosophical line of thinking. It goes back to Taoism and the Tao Te Ching from Lao Tzu, talking about, water is formless and it takes the shape of whatever it's in. So it's not rigid and adhering to strict rules. Water flows and it can fit the situation very well, and it can be soft, but it can also be extremely hard and erode the hardest things possible. So they use water as this symbol. And so I went into the documentary thinking it was going to be philosophical and kind of get into that side of Bruce Lee's life, which I was really excited about because most of the Bruce Lee stuff you see is about his physical attributes and what he
Mhm.
could do physically, like the 1 inch punch or doing push-ups on just a finger or two, or things like that. His physique or his training methods. So like I even have a couple of books about like his training and his diet and blah blah blah. So I expected it to be more philosophical than what that normally was. Well, it definitely wasn't a portrayal of his abilities and everything he could do. And there's been a lot of documentaries on Bruce Lee before, so I didn't expect them to take this approach. But really, they went documentary mode on his life and from like a professional perspective. So they talk about as a kid, his family. It almost seemed like they saw Bruce Lee as this character that people have kind of idolized and wanted to push back against that narrative almost.
Hmm.
So they wanted to take him less of this idol, this icon that's kind of an ethereal being at this point, and turn him into more of a real human, I guess. So they talked about like he came from one of the richest families in China, and he was a child actor and was really famous as a kid growing up because he was an actor and was really good and was always outgoing and had this, kind of boisterous personality. And he got into trouble in Hong Kong, so they sent him to San Francisco, and they kind of just portrayed him as like a rich, stuck-up kid, honestly. And I
Hmm.
hated the way they did that. But then when he got into San Francisco, I guess the thing I liked the most about it was tying him in as a civil rights icon, because I didn't realize the timing of when he was in San Francisco was the same time as MLK and Malcolm. It was the 60s, early
Yeah.
60s.
Right. Right.
So there's a ton of historical relevance there. And I guess I just never really put two and two together that, I mean, obviously in the movies you see him experiencing discrimination as an Asian American, but I don't know. Just in my mind, it never really clicked as much.
Yeah. Well, I
So
mean, that's probably the last thing that it really doesn't even come to mind when I think Bruce Lee. I don't think civil rights movement.
yeah,
I don't. I think of everything else that embodies who Bruce Lee, was. Yeah, I totally agree. That's kind of weird they went there.
yeah. So I mean, I get that part, and that, like I said, that
Hmm.
was my favorite part, was kind of getting some more historical context around there. And then they go into kind of Hollywood, and he was always the sidekick, and the way that Japanese and Chinese were portrayed on American film was very, very stereotyped, very
Mm-hmm.
cringe, just really, really like really bad and hard to watch. And he was trying to become a big actor in the US, and he could only get these kind of side roles where he's like the sidekick that just knows martial arts and, you know, doesn't have any lines or anything. So he's getting frustrated, so he writes his own thing for him to be in, which turned into the show Kung Fu. But the producers at, I think it was Warner Brothers, they just were like, nah, bro, people aren't gonna buy, the American audience is not gonna buy a Chinese dude. Like, your accent's too bad. I'm sorry, but you're out. So he wrote
Hmm.
this movie to be the star, and they cut him out of it.
Wow.
So from that point, he's super dejected. He goes back to, I think he goes back to Hong Kong at that point and starts making, you know, Big Boss, Fist of Fury, Chinese Connection, all of, you know, where he really starts to take off. So they focus more on the the push and pull of the movie industry. And then
Mm.
they kind of show him as like this jerk, honestly, from that point forward in his career. And the way they talked about his death was also really interesting, because it's something that's kind of shrouded in mystery, and the way they went about it almost made it seem like what he was doing to his body in terms of his training and like his diet and stuff. They made it almost seem like that is what killed him, because like he had a thing where he collapsed a period of time before he died. They didn't say how long it was. And then he had a headache one day, and one of his co-stars gave him a drug to like relax, and then he went and took a nap and never woke up. So they're saying like
Hmm.
the drug is what they're insinuating really did it, but they're saying that kind of like the conditions that he had his body in, like they said he had like the body of an 18-year-old boy when he was really
Huh.
in his 30s. So I it was weird. It was just like it was like they were trying to say something, but they didn't want to drive the point home. So it was almost geared
Yeah.
towards like, hey, all of you people that think there's the Chinese triads or whatever murdered Bruce Lee, or somebody was mad about him teaching kung fu to Westerners, pump the brakes on that and be more realistic. It was probably just his body was frail and he couldn't live
Mm.
anymore. Like I like it's like they were trying to distort the story but didn't really have a point to drive it home. And then from that point forward, it just kind of like meandered a little bit. They talked to his wife and his daughter a lot, and they read some quotes, but they never really like tied in the philosophy at all. Like from the point of his death, they were just kind of like, here's some quotes from his daughter reading his book, and
Hmm.
that's it. Like it was, I was so pissed. I was so effing mad when
Yeah.
the credits started rolling. I was like, I didn't know how to feel. It was nothing like I expected, and I'm still a little bit pissed off about it thinking about it, to be honest. Just the fact that it got such good
Yeah.
critical acclaim, like I did not like it at all. Two thumbs down from
Yeah.
this guy over here.
Yeah. Yeah. That's, I mean, it's a shame to hear that, because it's Bruce Lee, I mean, any one of his, reputation, and I mean, who he was, and anyone like him, like that status, if I don't know, it's really shocking to me that 30 for 30 did something bad, I guess, because all of them have really been brilliant. Um, yeah, it's tough to hear, especially Bruce Lee.
I just really wish, especially in today's time, like if they would have put forward the philosophy, I think a lot of people could have gotten a lot of value out of it. But they had just
Yeah.
like it's very gimmicky commercial surface level exposure of it, and then they just dove deep into his personal history that like didn't really tie into a main to any kind of main thing, like main point or takeaway,
Hmm.
or I don't know. It just made me, it left me feeling like they wanted to kind of tarnish the image of Bruce Lee and portray him in a, oh, he's not really this icon. There, he's more of a regular guy and has all these flaws. But they didn't like tie it together with a moving forward message. Like,
Hmm.
oh, he liked to say be water, so here's a quote, and we're not going to give you any background on it or where it came from. Like, come on, dude. Like, they didn't even mention Alan Watts or like any like ah, so pissed off about this. So yeah, 30 for
Dang.
30. You guys usually do a great job. I love watching the docs usually, but man, fail, bro. Fail hard.
Jeez. Jeez. Yeah. That's too